category of the biological molecules, the nucleic acid. So what are nucleic acids? Nucleic acids store and transmit hereditary or genetic information, and nucleic acid is a polymer consisting of monomers called as the nucleotides. Nucleic acids are large organic molecules that carry the code of life. Cells contain two types of nucleic acids, the deoxyribonucleic acid or the DNA, which is a double helix, while the ribonucleic acid or the RNA is typically single-stranded. So, to remember the two types of nucleic acids, look at the hair strand of the phenomenal character Daenerys Targaryen. It clearly shows the structure of both types of nucleic acid, so the DNA and the RNA. Now let's try to dissect the components of this biological molecule. Take note that when we say nucleoside with an S, it is a substructure made up of a nucleobase and a sugar. So there is no phosphate group present, and the nucleobases for DNA, we have the guanine, cytosine, adenine, and thymine. For DNA, thymine is replaced with uracil. So each nucleotide monomer consists of three components. At the center is a 5-carbon sugar. This is called as the pentose sugar. It is a ribose in RNA and deoxyribose in DNA. Attached to one of the sugar's carbon atoms is at least one phosphate group, or the PO4. Attached to the opposite side of the sugar is the nitrogenous base or a nucleobase. We have the adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, or uracil. So there are 5 nitrogenous bases in total and can be classified into 2. We have the purines, which are double ring structure, and the pyrimidines. These are single ring structures. So the nitrogenous base guanine and adenine are purines, while for the pyrimidines we have the cytosine, thymine, and uracil. So however, it is also important to note that guanine and adenine, cytosine are found in both the DNA and the RNA, while thymine can only be seen in DNA, and uracil, because it replaces now, this thymine is being replaced with uracil in the RNA. So therefore, a nucleotide or a nucleoside rather contains a nitrogenous or nitrogenous base and a sugar, while a nucleotide, which is the monomeric unit of the nucleic acid, it has 3 components. We have the nitrogenous base, we have the phosphate group, and the sugar. Okay. So these nucleotides are linked together via dehydration, synthesis, or condensation reaction, generating a unique sequence of nucleotides. So we refer to as the polynucleotides, and the types, we have the DNA and the RNA. DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, while RNA is ribonucleic acid. So a deoxyribonucleic acid is a double helix which stores information for the synthesis of specific proteins, and it also directs the rRNA or the ribosomal ribonucleic acid synthesis. So it contains a deoxyribose as its sugar, and the nitrogenous bases in DNA are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. So, a DNA polymer resembles to a spiral staircase. Alternating sugars and your phosphates forms the rails of the staircase. So, it becomes now a sugar-phosphate backbone. While the nitrogenous bases, here in the middle, they are it forms now the rungs of the staircase, and they are bonded together by a hydrogen bonds. So these hydrogen bonds between the bases hold the two strands of the nucleotides together. So A is always paired with T, and C is always paired with G. So the two strands are therefore complementary to and opposite to each other. So because complementary base pairing, one strand of the DNA contains the information for the other, providing a mechanism for the molecule to replicate. So dehydration synthesis, a phosphodiester bond is formed. It links the two sugars of the nucleic acids together. So the phosphodiester bond links the 3' carbon atom of the sugar molecule and the 5' carbon atom of the other molecule. So therefore, it creates now the sugar phosphate backbone of the DNA. Now let's take a look at this video showing what is inside the nucleus of the cell. So that is the nucleus, and inside you can see there the chromosomes. So that is the DNA now. It's a double helix. Okay. So class, do not forget that the proper DNA nucleobase pairing. So remember that T is always paired with A and C is always paired with G. So they clearly matches with one another. So unlike the DNA, RNA is typically single-stranded. So RNA is essential in coding, decoding, expression, and regulations of genes. So it carries the nitrogenous bases adenine, cytosine, guanine, and uracil. So the nucleic acids, DNA consists of two strands of nucleotides entwined to form a double helix shape held together by hydrogen bonds between your nitrogenous bases. So it contains the nucleobases cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine. While the RNA is usually single-stranded with nucleobases cytosine, guanine, adenine, and uracil. So remember that both molecules participate in the production of proteins in cells. So on the other hand, high temperature and or low salt concentration causes the two strands to melt or dissociate. So when DNA is introduced into a high temperature, so it denatures now the DNA molecule, thus separating the two strands apart, and it allows now the insertion of a probe with a base complementary to the denatured DNA. So it undergoes now what we called as hybridization. Therefore, it creates now a hybrid molecule. So DNA hybridization is a powerful tool in molecular biology. And thanks to these persons, so these scientists, we have James Watson and Francis Crick. They are the ones who describe that DNA as a double helical structure. Summary of this biological molecule. So we have the carbohydrates. So carbohydrates contains the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and it is for energy storage, structural, and for communication. While the lipids also contains the essential elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and these are for energy storage, protective membrane, and for communication. As to the proteins, these proteins are made up of elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So it is for communication, transport, chemical breakdown of substances, and for structural support. And the last biomolecule is the nucleic acids. It contains the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So it contains genetic information or the hereditary information.